Hi, I'm Clive Meaker from Dr Meaker, and I'm here in my studio in Easton, Bristol. I call it Flight Case Recordings, and I'm here to talk about my new album, which is Dirt and Soul, which is made here in this room in Bristol, and I'm going to be talking about the title track on the album, which is also called Dirt and Soul.
Your heart is mine. Your worth is sacrifice. You're running scared.
Hi, so I'm Clive from Dr Meaker, and I've been asked to come, I've been asked these guys to come in today and show you how I worked on one of the songs from my album. So I've chosen the title track for the album, entitled Dirt and Soul, which is here. So I'm now going to talk a little bit about how I made this track and how it started and how it progressed. So to start with, it was just a case of being on this piano over here, and I just playing the chords to the song, which is this. And I got a vibe doing that, and sort of put it down over a drum beat, and just started to build it up in the way that you might normally. So I chose to use the grand piano on the EXS24 at first, which is really rubbish, and it's like got quite a rave sound to it, like an old school rave sound. And I realised during the mix down towards the end, this is not cutting it. So what I decided to do was, I really like the bottom end of it because it's very solid, like a rave piano, but the top end was really cheap and nasty. So I decided to use the Steiny D for just the top end because I really like the top end of that because it's quite mellow and quite nice. So I made my piano using two pianos, the EXS one and the Steiny D. So this is the EXS Yamaha piano on its own. And what I've done is I've taken the top end off. So before, it sounded like this. And you hear a horrible top end. It's got this horrible chime. Took that out and then added the Steiny D for the top end at the frequency that I'd cut on the other one, and together they sound like this. And I've put the top end to the right slightly to make it wider. I've also got a compressor on the piano, first of all to just flatten the dynamics out so it's not quite so pangy and dynamic, and then I've got one after the EQ, which I believe is it's sidechained by the kick drum. So later on in the track, whilst the piano happens, the kick drum punches through the piano. So after doing the piano, I put a beat down, and this track's been through several different types of beats, several breaks. So I just went with the piano in the first instance, and then Laurent came over and started to write the vocals for it. And he came over and just wrote the vocals in one day, really. We just spent an afternoon doing it. We recorded it all here in this room where this camera is right now, looking at me. I've got this old mic stand, which is my lucky mic stand. So I used that, and we just did it all in here. So I could play you some of the vocals that we recorded. This is the verse.
You keep me up at night, a fire burning wide. Please don't dim the light. You've got me hypnotized. That's just your style.
So in terms of the vocal, Laurent wrote the verses and choruses, and we did single take for the verses, and it pretty much is one take because Laurent's an awesome singer. He just smashes it every time, although everything he does sing is different each time, so you can very rarely get him to re-record exactly the same again, but that's part of his charm, and that's the same when he plays live as well. He just always sings slightly different. So what we did is we recorded the verses first, and then for the choruses we sort of built up layers. We decided that we wanted to go for the approach where more is better, so we just started to build up layer on layer. So with regards to the verse, the plugins that I've used, and which I use a lot, are the UAD plugins. I just use the LA2A compressor because it rocks and it just sorts it out in one go. You just turn one knob up, turn the other knob up, and you just find the right sort of levels. So this is the LA2A at work.
I really need you to survive.
I'm hitting it quite hard.
'Cause I'm a soul man waiting.
That's hitting at about -10 decibels. But it works, and I often automate afterwards as well. With Laurent, he's got quite a low voice, quite a husky low voice, so it's quite difficult to get him to cut through the mix. So I have to sort of be really specific with the EQ, and it takes a long time to get him to sit right in the mix. So the chain that I've used is the LA2A followed by the Pultec, and I've pushed his 10 kilohertz there, pushed it up by 5. Not a completely sharp band, but sort of quite sharp. And then after that, I put a bit of tape delay on there because it gives it vibe. I like to use a lot of delay in my vocals for vibe. By pushing Laurent, he's got a kind of frequency where it gets quite resonant and a little bit nasty around sort of 6K, somewhere around there. So I find that I'm pushing and pulling, so it's just trying to find the right balance. So for this, I use a de-esser around 6K to just pull back the S's. You can probably see.
To come alive. I know you know the way you get me so high. And though you're
It's just quite simple de-essing really. And then on to another EQ. What have I done there? Yeah, so then I've pulled out a little bit what the EQ was doing. So I pulled out that resonant frequency, which is 5,200 hertz for him. And that kind of did the job to pull back the harshness. But then I felt like I needed to boost a little bit more, so I'm going back and forwards, back and forwards. It seems mad, but it's just the process. Every track's got its own process. But I use this, what is this, Novel Tech enhancer to cut him through. And I also use this on the female vocals as well. And then finally, I put him through the EMT reverb. I think it's the 140, which I just find it sounds really classic. A really, really lovely sound to it. Blues vocal preset, nothing too major. Probably tweaked the pre-delay a little bit to fit with the groove of the track. Made it quite big at over 3 seconds. Yeah, EQ'd it a little bit as well. I tend to take out the bottom end on the reverb just so it sits up front a little bit more and doesn't get too muddy. Sort of all simple sort of techniques. And with regards to that verse, I've sent his verse to a decapitator, which is my favourite distortion in the box plugin. I do have a rooster here as well, if you want to have a look at that one. This is similar to, I think the decapitator's based on these thermionic culture bits of gear, and they're just so nice in terms of harmonic distortion, where you can add triodes or pentodes, different levels of harmonics, and you can absolutely ram stuff. So I put a lot of things through the thermionic when recording in. Just to quickly say though, for this vocal I recorded through the SM7B microphone, and I've got a Neve rip-off over here. It's kind of like a clone of a Neve preamp, which was made by Andy Henderson and his mate Gus. I think they made that one for me. And it just sounds so sweet. The SM7B along with the Neve preamps just fell safe. Yep, so then, as going back to this, on the decapitator, I just fed a little bit of that vocal to the decapitator just to make it pop through the mix a bit more. So I'll just play you the effect of the decapitator so you can hear how harsh it sounds on its own.
You've got me hypnotized. That's just your style.
And if you mix that with the original,
I really need you to survive. 'Cause I'm a soul man.
and I think it might be interesting to quickly play you the dry vocal and then the completely processed vocal, so you can just kind of hear how it started and then where it went to.
'Cause I'm a soul man waiting to come alive.
And I'm just going to put on all the effects. I'll put them on as it goes and see if it crunches too much. But
You keep me up at night, a fire burning wide. Please don't dim the light. You've got me hypnotized. That's just your style. I really need you to survive.
so that's the sound of the vocal pre and post plug-in. So there you go. So that's the lead vocal. Now for the backing vocals for the choruses, I chose to have a sort of a main lead vocal, which is compressed and treated, but it's dry. And then I've also got the exact same vocal with all the effects and whatnot. And one of those is doubled, so it makes it seem wider. So it's basically 2 tracks the same, but with 2 different treatments. And I'll play you that now, so you can hear it. So this is the track where everything is processed very similarly to the verse. So it just sounds like this.
You're running scared.
Super distorted and crunchy, so it really cuts through when the beat drops in. And then I've also got this double track of it as well, which is got a doubler left and right, so you've got the lead in the middle and the left and right out wide with another delay, and that's going off to a bus with a compressor on it, an LA3A, and a lot of the other vocals are going there as well. So I use these kind of buses where lots of things go to one place and all get smashed together, and it just creates like a really dirty, crunched together sound, which sounds like it's all coming from one place. So together they sound like this.
You're running scared.
And that's it. That's the main chorus line. Then I've got 8 tracks of backing vocals, which again, they all go to that same place through that bus, through that compressor. And what we did is we recorded one group of 4 backing vocals for the chorus, which are all on the same octave as the lead. And then we recorded another 4 tracks up an octave, because Laurent's got a really good falsetto voice. So this is how those all sound together. I'll take out the lead, so you can just hear the backing vocals on their own here.
But you can't hide. Your heart is mine.
And they sound super sweet, really, really nice. This is Celestine's backing vocals for the chorus, which are really similar.
You're running scared.
So to build all that up together, it sounds like this.
But you can't hide.
Which I just love that sound. It's so big. It's old school retro sort of sound, which is what I wanted to do for this record. I want big vocalists, big singers on my music, and a lot of the music that's popular at the moment is quite thin. It's heavily auto-tuned. It sounds quite synthetic, and I just wanted to go back to the sort of old school soul to soul, Carol Wheeler, Massive Attack, those sort of 90s sounding vocalists recorded with the same sort of techniques. So altogether, the choruses sound like this.
You're running scared, but you can't hide. Your heart is mine. You're worth the sacrifice.
So that's the sound of the chorus, which I love, and I think they've done a brilliant job on that. Right, so that's that. Next up, it came to the guitars. I wanted to build the track, and I wanted to add progression as the track evolved. So I worked with a guitarist called Charlie Allen, who I met at a local jam night called the Left Bank Jam, which is run by the LBJBs, run by Marcel Osborne in Bristol. And it's a real cool place. It's quite unique in the fact that they're just jamming old school funk. It's really inspirational because there's not that many nights that are left that do that sort of thing. And I go down there a lot, and that's where I find musicians and people to work with. And Charlie Allen just kills it on guitar. So I asked if he'd come over and put down guitars for this track. So the first thing that he put down was a little arpeggio on the second verse to pick up the verse. So I'll just find that now for you and talk about it. We recorded it in this room. We recorded absolutely everything in this room. It's just a small double bedroom in Easton in Bristol. Or it's not that small, but it's smallish. And we set up a guitar amp over here behind this camera, and SM57 with a guitar amp, and it was far too loud for this room. The neighbours were definitely a bit sort of scared, I think. And we recorded this picking sound. So this is the sound of the arpeggio.
Your pride, electric sparks inside.
What we did there was apply a compression and distortion just to flatten out the peaks a little bit for the compression. I used the Elysia compressor. I've got the Elysia EQ over here as well. I really like Elysia gear. It's German made, it's super clean, and it's sort of like the creme de la creme of analog, whereby it's almost sounds digital, but it's better in my opinion. It's got that super clean analog sound with a little bit of fairy dust on top. We also recorded a lot of distorted guitar tones where we fed back the sound of his guitar distorting. I really like the Prodigy. They actually used the JD 990, which I've got down there, to recreate the sound of a guitar distorting. And Massive Attack and Angelo Brascini, he played the guitars on Mezzanine. I really like those creeping sort of guitar distorted tones. So we were going for that sort of sound, and it was really interesting to work with Charlie, and I knew the sound that I wanted and he knew how to achieve it. So together it was a really creative process. So we've called them creepers, some of these sounds. This is some of the distorted guitar sounds that we got. And if you hear that in the mix, this is the sort of effect that it gives in the mix.
Electric sparks inside, you drive me wild. Your touch I can't deny. I'm just a soul.
So it's really subtle and just bedded down, but it all adds vibe to the track. We've got loads of those sorts of tracks. All these tracks here in blue, these are all guitars. So there's a lot of guitars going on. So we built the track up as it was going by adding these creepers, adding effects, different things, just to keep the vibe growing and growing. Because the whole track, I wanted it to just brood for a long time over the first verse, first chorus, second verse, second chorus. Keep it brooding, and then I wanted it to just go absolutely mad and intense and energetic at the end. So when we got to the end of the second chorus, I was walking around Bristol, headphones on, for weeks and weeks making this track. It took me a long time to make this track, probably 6 months. And I would go out at night just listening to the mix and thinking, what does it need? What does it need? And I decided it needed an epic outro. And I wanted to make it kind of almost like rock. Sort of like, I remember a track by the Rolling Stones where they just had this female vocalist at the very end of a track that was just like a screaming diva wailing and ad-libbing, and I just wanted to sort of do that, which was quite a random thing for me to do, but that's what I worked out just walking around. I think it's really important for anyone to make music, to give it time to digest it yourself and learn over time how something might sound over the long period. So this track, as with a lot of them, took me a long time to build up. So I decided I wanted to get some nasty guitar at the end, and so that's what we did. We recorded Charlie in here. I asked him to give it as much as he could give it on his guitar, and then once we distorted it in the room, I then put it through Decapitator and distorted it even more, and the sound of that sounds like it's here somewhere. I think I called it Monster. Yeah, Monster. So this is the sound of about 3 of Charlie's guitars towards the end of the track. Ooh. So it's proper rah. And when you double that up with all of the other guitars that we recorded for the outro section, I'll just play those in sequence as well. So the riff of the bass line, I asked Charlie to play that as well, to sort of reinforce it. And in some ways I kind of was thinking sort of Quincy Jones, Michael Jackson, I can't remember the track where they brought in electric guitars, but it's very, very sort of 80s sounding layers and stacks of guitars. That's the sort of sound I was going for. All of it was again recorded through the SM57 through the Neve preamp, and all recorded in this room. So everything was in this room. So here's the first 2 tracks of the guitars on the outro. And then some more. and some more. And then there's more still. So we've got adding the lead guitar as well. It sounds like this. This is all of the guitars. And that is exactly what I wanted for this track, because being known for drum and bass, making drum and bass, enjoying making drum and bass, I wanted to just move away and do something totally creative with another musician I'd never worked with, and I haven't really worked with a guitar on this level before as well. So for me it was extremely inspiring and liberating, really. So that's the guitar sound of the record pretty much, and then I asked Laurent to come back in and re-sing the final chorus to try and match these guitars, and he absolutely belted it as much as he could, and we got a lot more out of his vocal. I still felt it needed that extra something just to take it up here, and Celestine Walcott Gordon in Bristol, I think she's one of Bristol's best vocalists. She's just got that power vocal. So I asked if she would come in and ad-lib around Laurent's vocal, so that we could just have this big uplifting thing. Like I said with the Rolling Stones record that I remember hearing years ago, I wanted to try and do that. And so we did that. So we recorded Celestine again in the room, and she recorded it on the SM7B through the Neve, and she absolutely smashed it on the first take. And I was like, whoa, this is distorting. So I had to sort of wind this knob down whilst recording. We were on 70, I had to bring it back whilst recording. So just as we went into the final drop, I was sort of turning the knob down, but the vibe was so good that we just decided, let's just use this. Even though it was slightly distorted, it didn't matter because you've got all them guitars and everything, it bedded in quite nicely. So the lesson there is just go with the vibe. If something sounds awesome, even if it's not sonically perfect, doesn't matter. Just absolutely commit to it. If it sounds right, it is right. So this is the vocal from Celestine that she put down at the end of the track. So as you hear, she was competing against those guitars, so I had to mix her to cut through on top of those. So I used some side chain compression techniques so that she cut through a little bit and the guitars backed off just a little bit at the same time. And I also had to mix Laurent singing his final chorus as well, so it was a real balance. And then you've also got drums and bass and everything else to fit in the mix. So the mix was super challenging. But I feel like I did the absolute best that I could do, and I'm really happy with the results. So talking about the mix itself, I've used a combination of all these tracks. If you look at this, there's so many tracks, and there's a lot hidden as well. The green ones are hidden. There's just ridiculous amount of tracks that I've used for this song. And each track, if you go into the mixer window, has got, you know, lots of plugins, lots of these things. I'm surprised my computer handles it. It's an old school 2009 Mac with about 6 gig of RAM. It's not that up to date. I can't pretend to be the most up to date sort of nerdy music producer with regards to this stuff. For me, it's more about vibe. It's about the art of it all. And you know, I have some really good friends that come around and help me deal with the kind of tech side. But I want to just make music really, and engineer and use the outboard stuff. Okay, so to talk a little bit about the drums and bass now for Dirt and Soul. So I went with a really old school break for this track, which I actually got off a sample CD, which I've had since about 2003. It's a BT New School Breaks, it was called, but they're very old school now. So I put those drum beats on, and I programmed them in a way that I wasn't really sure if it was working or not. And I'd been walking this track in my headphones through the streets of Bristol for about 3 months, and I was tweaking the drums, doing this, doing that, and I just got lost in it, to be quite honest. And so I knew that Neil Davidge is in Bristol. He was the producer for Massive Attack Mezzanine, and we were friends on Facebook, although we'd never met. And I was kind of like at a lost end with it, and I thought, I'll hit him up on Facebook, see if he'll... Sorry, Neil, if everybody hits you up on Facebook now, but I was just going to try and see if he would give me some advice on that. So I hit him up and said, I'm really stuck. Could you please give me some advice on the drums and bass? I'm just not sure. And he said, I think you should just do a 1-2 beat, just boof, ka, boof, ka. So I used the same break and I just cut it, kick, snare, kick, snare. And he was saying he thought I should get more rhythm out of the track through changing the bass line. And Lorna wrote the original bass line to the chords. It was just a simple bum, 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 bum. So then I reprogrammed it to be like ba-ba-da-ba-da-ba-dum, bum, 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 bum. So it was more groovy with this 1-2 kick and snare. And that worked really well, and I was really happy that Neil gave me that advice, because he's obviously got the Midas touch. He's made one of my favourite records of all time. So I really feel like there's Bristol heritage embedded in this track as well. It means a lot to me. So anyway, let's go and have a look at the actual drums. So we've got a kick, a snare, a delay on the snare. I've also got some gunshots which are kind of ringing out in the background with delays. So the drums at the beginning start very simple, and I'll just play you those all together. And I've applied a few tricks, like widening them with reverb and different things like this, but this is the sound of the drums basically. So that's the sound of the first chorus. And when I make music and when I make songs, I like to build the tracks as they go. I'm not all about throwing in absolutely everything on the first drop because I'm making it for radio or for other people. I like my music to evolve as it goes so that it's an enjoyable and interesting listen from start to finish. So the second verse, I stepped it up very slightly by adding extra little bits. I think it's the extra ride cymbal. And then for the final chorus, I recorded Tom, the drummer from Dr Meaker, playing live ride cymbals. Again, we recorded in the room, so we get the same sound for the whole record. Everything's recorded in this room, so the sound of Dirt and Soul is this room. And I think it's still important to apply those old techniques where you record an album in one space so that the sound of the album falls all the way through the record. So yeah, if you want to do a little 360 of the room, you can see it. It's just a normal bedroom, a little bit of acoustic treatment. So here is the sound of the final chorus with the added live drums and a tambourine. Okay, so what I did with the kick drum for this track, and what I do with quite a few of my tracks with kick drum, is I bring them out of the computer through my AMEC mixing desk. I've got a patch bay over here, and I route it out and I insert it into this DBX 160 compressor. And I'll just play it now so you can see how much I'm affecting it by. Here's the kick. And that compressor is absolute magic on kicks and snares. You can really get the sound of a snare just biting so hard. And it's like £200 for that, which is quite a lot of money, but in regards to, say, against something like a Distressor or other similar compressors, I think it's an absolute bargain. It does one trick, but it does it amazingly well. So I use that one for kick on this track. For snare, it's part of the same break, but what I did was I just used plugins for this. I used a bit of EQ and a decapitator. I love the decapitator on loads of different things. So I've absolutely smashed it as much as I possibly can and then put it through Punish. And then I've used the parallel compression component on there to just put some of that distortion against the original sound. I'll play you that. That sounds like this. without the decapitator, it sounds like this. Huh, not much different, a little bit of difference. It's just got that bit of top end distortion on it. I've wound up the low cut, so you can just hear how it's just making the end go, and that sits it through in the mix. It's all a balancing act when mixing. I find that I'm having to constantly tweak each thing to sort of get the whole blend to work, like you would with a picture. If you were drawing a picture, you might scratch some surfaces away and then build a bit more up just to get the overall thing sounding right. Just sort of classic mixing, really. So for that and for the drums, I chose to go with quite a simple reverb. It's called the Easy Verb. It's old, but there's something about it that I like. It's quite lo-fi. So this is the sound of the reverb for the drums. Just sounds like a, I don't know, a room or something. But I use that on a couple of tracks on the album. So like I was saying about how I like to tie the album together in this room when I record things, I also use similar plugins and reverb settings and delay settings for the entire album to try and keep the continuity so that it sounds like one album from one place. So I also use that reverb on the drums for Good Fight, another track, and also Is It You? I use that reverb setting as well. So every track I made, I tried to have at least 2 or 3 common components that link to other tracks on the album, so everything links up. With the drums, that's it pretty much. It's just a really simple drum pattern. So I'll move on to the bass now. Alright, so looking at the bass for this album, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, about 7 or 8 tracks of bass, different basses for different parts of the song. So for the verse I used, I've called it Skyfall triplet bass, but it's the albino. It's something I've used before on a track. And I often do that. I build up sounds. I'm sure a lot of people do that as well. They build up sounds over their musical time, and then you can call on certain sounds for certain jobs because you know they work. So the verse bass is a very simple bass, and it's just a sort of tonal bass that does this. And for me, I hear that as electric. That sounds like electric to me. It's almost like you can see the waveform and you could feel the waveform. It's a nice sort of electric sound. So that's the verse bass. And then for the chorus, I wanted to go for like an old school Stevie Wonder style funk sort of bass sound, analog synth sound. Although, even though I say that, and I do use a lot of analog synths, I actually went for Rob Pappen blue synthesizer for this. And it sounds like this. And that sounds hyper distorted because I'm running it through this Phoenix over here. So what I've done is I've sent it through my mixing desk, and then I've sent it to this, and you can see I'm absolutely smashing it at full capacity. I've got the attack and release right down so that it's just clamping it as fast as it can, which is quite slow as a compressor. And you'll see if I press play, you'll see how it's affecting it. And what you're hearing now is the sound of the original bass, which is coming through 7 and 8. So if I just quickly mute everything else, you can hear just the bass. So that's the raw original bass out of the computer. And then I'm also sending that to the Phoenix and then blending it back in very slightly on the mixing desk. And what you're hearing through the Phoenix, this is the sound of the Phoenix. So it's distorted, and you add that with the original sound, and that's it. And then I've got these little answers. I call them answers. They're the end of line responses to that, and they are kind of glitchy little sounds which sound like this. So that's 2 sounds. The boo is one, and the big whack is the other one. So together, that all sounds like this. So that's the sound of the bass for the song, and it's nice and distorted, which I like. It's groovy. It's just, I'm happy with it. I'm going to use that sound again, I'm sure, on other projects. Okay, so this track it sounds really simple. There sounds like there's not that many elements, but as you can see, there's loads and loads and loads of layers. So everything in red, and I tend to do the colours of the rainbow generally, just because it looks pretty. So I've got like drums in red, and then the vocals orange, backing vocals yellow, female backing vocals are supposed to be green, and then guitars blue, synths are purple, I guess, and then bass is that other colour at the end of the rainbow. So I've got all those things happening at once, and the mix, I tend to mix as I go. So as I build the track, I'm mixing it all the time. So it's building in fidelity, and like I'm making it as I want it to sound. And then when it comes to the very end, you know, you go out, you try it in the car, you try it in the club, you try it in the earbuds, you try it in headphones, you walk the streets with it, you just digest and live with it for a while. And then I slowly tweak things over maybe a month at the end. And so I'll have all the desks set up. And whilst the desk is set up for a track, I tend to just stick with it. If I make any other music, I'll make it through 2 channels and just do it in the box, like if I have to do something else. But I tend to do 1 track at a time because it's really hard to recall all of this analog stuff. I used the DBX for this, so I'll just point over here. I used the DBX, the Phoenix. Behind here is the C2 smart compressor, which is based on the SSL G series compressor, but on steroids apparently, because it's got the crush button. I didn't use that for this. I went with the standard 4-to-1 external sidechain out, so that's the sort of classic SSL desk sound, which gives it a real nice punch. I recorded quite a bit of stuff through the Rooster when I went in, and then if you come over here, it's all mixed through the mixing desk, but over here on the mix bus, I've got the X Filter EQ, which has got a lovely top end, and I'll just give you an example of how the EQ affects the mix, the overall sound of the mix. So this is without, and then I'll push it in. So it adds like a really nice top end, very, very clean, but a little bit of magic, a little bit of fairy dust. I also use this API, and I use this compressor, mainly on a parallel. So I actually send the whole mix, or elements of the whole mix, through my auxes, out the aux main 1 and 2 aux out, and then I send them into the compressor, and then I blend them here, just like the whole mix, and I absolutely smash it through the API. And it just gives it like a real dirty grain, and you'll hear that right through the album. I've done that. It's like just something I like to do. It's awesome on drums as well. It's really smacky. So that's basically it for the mix. I used the mixing desk here, EQs on the board. This is an Amex BC2 mixing desk, which I think Neve had a hand in, AMEC, in developing their mixing desks. It's a really lovely sound to it. So this whole setup here, this hybrid in the box with plugins, out the box through the mixing desk and through the outboard, that's the sound of Dr Meaker Dirt and Soul, which you can go and buy if you want to. Yeah, and it's just the way I work. It's really good for me. It works. Thank you very much for joining me today in my studio in Bristol. I have been Clive, and talking about this, Dr Meaker Dirt and Soul. So please come and check it out. Check us out when we play live, and happy future musicking.